If you remain in this frequency for 7 minutes, your reality will begin to shift while you are still sitting here. Reality does not respond to effort. It responds to state. It mirrors coherence. It reorganizes around frequency. And if you sustain a new frequency long enough, even for 7 uninterrupted minutes, the structure of your experience begins adjusting in real time. You were not guided here by accident. Recognition brought you here. Something within you is already aware that the world you see is not solid, not fixed, not final. It is responsive. It is reflective. It is waiting for a stable instruction. Frequency is the instruction. Every thought you think carries a tone. Every emotion you feel carries a charge. Every state you embody emits a pattern into the field of possibility. And that field is not passive. It arranges itself around the dominant signal you sustain. Most people never hold a coherent frequency long enough to see the shift. They oscillate. They doubt. They interrupt their own signal. They try to force change, and forcing fractures coherence. The field cannot reorganize around instability. But if you remain here, without reaching, without straining, without asking how, and simply stabilize into this awareness for 7 minutes, something irreversible begins. Old patterns weaken. Competing signals lose strength. The mirror starts clearing. This is the point of no return. Because once you witness that reality responds to your state, you can no longer pretend you are powerless inside it. Once you see that your inner coherence alters your outer structure, you cannot go back to believing circumstances control you. 7 minutes is enough to interrupt momentum. Enough to calm the nervous system. Enough to let the noise settle. Enough to allow a new baseline frequency to emerge. And when that baseline shifts, reality must follow. Not by magic. By resonance. The world you experience is not separate from you. It is a reflection filtered through perception, expectation, and identity. When your state changes, the filter changes. When the filter changes, the reflection changes. This is law. You do not bend reality with effort. You align with a frequency, and reality bends itself around you. Stay here. Breathe slower. Release the need to understand every detail. Let awareness expand without grasping. Let stillness become the dominant signal. The field is already listening. If you remain in this frequency for 7 minutes, the architecture of your experience begins reorganizing. You may not see fireworks. You may not hear thunder. But subtle shifts will begin. Perception will soften. Resistance will thin. Possibility will widen. And once you feel that widening, you will know. This is not about becoming someone new. It is about recognizing what you already are, the stabilizing intelligence within the field itself. If you are aligned with this frequency, subscribe and remain within it. Reality does not respond to what you say. It responds to what you are. You can repeat affirmations for hours, construct perfect sentences, declare powerful intentions, and still see no change. Not because the universe is ignoring you, but because words are surface vibrations. The field does not reorganize around language. It reorganizes around coherence. Your inner state is the signal. Your emotional baseline is the broadcast. Your level of calm or contraction is the instruction. This is the law. When your inner world is fragmented, doubtful, tense, or resistant, that fragmentation becomes the template through which reality organizes itself. The outer structure mirrors the inner structure. Not symbolically. Structurally. If your nervous system is braced for struggle, the world reflects resistance. If your identity expects delay, circumstances stretch. If your emotional field carries scarcity, opportunities appear limited. Not because you are being tested. Because the field mirrors the dominant pattern you sustain. Words do not override vibration. You can say, "I trust," but if your body is tight and your breath is shallow, the instruction being sent is tension. You can declare, I am abundant, but if you feel fear underneath, fear is the active frequency. The quantum field does not decode vocabulary. It stabilizes around signal strength. This is why forcing never works. When you try to force change, you activate the frequency of lack. Effort mixed with urgency tells reality that something is missing. That missing state becomes the organizing principle. The more you push, the more resistance appears. Not as punishment, but as reflection. Forcing creates friction. Allowing creates flow. When you relax into calm receptivity, you remove the contradiction in your signal. When your body softens, when your breath deepens, when you stop demanding and begin stabilizing, the field receives a clear instruction. Coherence replaces noise. Stability replaces oscillation. And reality reorganizes around stability. You are not convincing the universe. You are synchronizing with it. Calm is not passivity. It is alignment. It is the state where your emotional tone, your thoughts, and your identity are no longer arguing with each other. In that unified state, the external world begins adjusting without effort. This is why 7 minutes matter. Sustained coherence gives the field enough consistency to respond. Not because time itself creates magic, but because uninterrupted alignment strengthens the signal. Notice your state right now. Not your words. Not your intentions. Your actual emotional posture. Is it open or braced? Expanded or contracted? Settled or searching? That posture is shaping what unfolds. Shift the state, and the mirror shifts. Not gradually. Immediately. You are not here to perfect language. You are here to stabilize frequency. When you understand this fully, you stop negotiating with circumstances and begin tending to your inner coherence. The moment your state changes, the structure surrounding you must follow. This is not belief. It is resonance. Like the video now as confirmation that you understand reality mirrors your state. Emotion is not a reaction to reality. It is a directional signal within it. What you feel is not random, and it is not inconvenient. It is guidance. It is calibration. It is a precise indicator of whether your current perspective is aligned with your deeper intelligence or moving against it. Expansion is alignment. When you feel open, clear, grounded, quietly confident, or even gently hopeful, that sensation is not something you created by accident. It is resonance. It is the experience of your identity matching a higher organizing pattern. In expansion, your system is coherent. Your thoughts, your body, and your deeper awareness are synchronized. Contraction is misalignment. When you feel tight, irritated, anxious, defensive, or heavy, the emotion is not punishment. It is feedback. It is showing you that the lens you are holding in this moment is distorting your own clarity. Contraction is friction between who you are and what you are currently believing. This is why emotion is instruction to the field. Your sustained emotional tone becomes the atmosphere through which reality organizes. Not because emotion controls the world, but because emotion reflects your level of internal coherence. And coherence is what stabilizes frequency. If you remain in resentment, resentment becomes the stabilizing tone. If you remain in quiet trust, trust becomes the stabilizing tone. The field responds to what is consistent. This is not about suppressing negative emotion. It is about understanding its function. Contrast refines desire. When something triggers contraction, it clarifies what you prefer. When you feel frustration, it reveals the direction of alignment. When you feel disappointment, it sharpens the outline of what feels true. Contrast is not a detour. It is refinement. Without contrast, desire remains vague. With contrast, clarity emerges. The key is not eliminating contraction. It is recognizing it as guidance and gently adjusting perspective until expansion returns. Expansion is the confirmation that your current orientation matches your deeper intelligence. You do not need to force expansion. You allow it. When you shift your attention from what feels wrong to what feels stable, when you breathe and soften instead of resist, when you observe without collapsing into the emotion, expansion begins to reappear naturally. That shift is alignment. And when expansion is sustained, even subtly, your frequency stabilizes. Stability is what allows reality to reorganize. Not intensity. Not drama. Stability. A calm, steady sense of openness held consistently is more powerful than a brief surge of excitement followed by doubt. The field responds to the dominant tone, not the loudest moment. So notice your emotional baseline. Not the spikes. The baseline. Are you generally contracted or generally open? Generally guarded or generally trusting? That baseline is the atmosphere in which your life unfolds. Emotion is not your enemy. It is your compass. It is the quiet instrument tuning you back into coherence. When you begin honoring expansion as guidance and viewing contraction as refinement rather than failure, your relationship to experience changes. You stop fighting your emotions. You start listening. And when you listen, your frequency becomes intentional instead of reactive. That is when alignment becomes natural. That is when stability becomes possible. That is when the field begins to respond with precision. Emotion is not happening to you. It is speaking for you. Up until now, you have been introduced to the principle. Now you move into the mechanics. Not inspiration. Not belief. Structure. Why is 7 minutes enough? Because reality reorganizes around dominance. Not intensity, not volume, but dominance. When a frequency is sustained without interruption, it begins to override competing patterns. What was previously scattered becomes coherent. What was previously noisy becomes ordered. Your brain functions the same way. Neural pathways strengthen through repetition and sustained attention. When you hold a thought for only a few seconds before doubting it, the pathway remains weak. When you stabilize attention on a coherent state, even briefly but without interruption, reinforcement begins. Circuits synchronize. The nervous system recalibrates. The body shifts from defense to regulation. 7 uninterrupted minutes of emotional coherence is long enough to interrupt habitual loops and begin forming a new dominant pattern. This is not mystical exaggeration. It is alignment between biological reinforcement and metaphysical law. Attention is energy. Where attention stabilizes, neural firing patterns synchronize. When neural firing patterns synchronize, perception reorganizes. And perception is the interface through which reality is experienced. Simultaneously, at the energetic level, sustained coherence collapses weaker signals. Imagine multiple radio stations playing at once. The loudest, clearest signal overrides the static. In the same way, when you maintain calm, expansive presence without drifting into contradiction, the field begins aligning around that stabilized tone. Competing timelines are not fought. They are starved of reinforcement. Most people never hold coherence long enough for dominance to occur. They relax for a moment, then check for results. They feel alignment, then question it. Each interruption reactivates the old pattern. Oscillation prevents stabilization. 7 minutes changes that. When you commit to remaining in this frequency without checking, without measuring, without evaluating, something measurable happens inside you. Heart rate steadies. Breath deepens. Cortisol lowers. Neural oscillations slow into synchrony. Attention consolidates instead of scattering. This internal order becomes the dominant broadcast. And because reality mirrors coherence, the external structure begins subtly reorganizing around that dominance. Not dramatically at first. Structurally. Probability is not random. It is influenced by where observation stabilizes. When your identity holds steady in a new emotional baseline, weaker probabilities lose energy. The dominant pattern crystallizes. 7 minutes is enough to shift dominance. Not because time is magical, but because consistency overrides fragmentation. In those minutes, you are not trying to change anything. You are allowing coherence to stabilize. The moment coherence stabilizes, the system recalibrates. Your perception softens. Your responses adjust. Micro-decisions shift. Those micro-shifts alter outcomes. It feels immediate because it is structural. You are not forcing reality into a new shape. You are allowing the dominant signal to become clear enough that the mirror has no choice but to reflect it. Hold coherence. Let attention remain steady. Do not interrupt the signal with doubt. 7 minutes is enough to establish dominance. And once dominance shifts, the architecture of your experience begins rearranging around the new center. Every possible version of your life already exists as a probability. Not in some distant dimension, but as overlapping potentials within the same field of consciousness. Infinite timelines coexist simultaneously. They are not created one by one. They are selected. And what selects them is not desire. It is identity. You do not experience the timeline you wish for. You experience the timeline that matches who you believe yourself to be. Identity is the stabilizing frequency that filters infinite possibility into a single lived experience. It is the lens through which the field crystallizes. If you see yourself as someone who struggles, struggle becomes consistent. If you see yourself as someone who is overlooked, confirmation appears. If you see yourself as someone aligned and supported, support becomes visible. Not because reality is granting requests, but because identity determines which probability solidifies. Effort does not change identity. Recognition does. When you recognize yourself as coherent, as stable, as the organizing intelligence within your experience, identity shifts without strain. Effort tries to force a new timeline while holding on to the old self-image. Recognition releases the old image entirely. This is why 7 minutes matter. 7 uninterrupted minutes of stabilized frequency weaken identity loops that have been reinforced for years. Identity is not a fixed structure. It is a pattern maintained through repetition. When repetition is interrupted, even briefly but consistently, the pattern begins to dissolve. During those 7 minutes, you are not fighting the old timeline. You are simply not feeding it. You are not rehearsing the familiar doubts. You are not reinforcing the habitual self-concept. You are holding a new baseline long enough for it to begin stabilizing. And when the new baseline stabilizes, competing timelines lose coherence. They do not disappear violently. They collapse quietly. They lose dominance. They fade from relevance because they no longer match the identity being sustained. This is the collapse of competing timelines. Not destruction. Selection. You are not pushing one future into existence. You are withdrawing energy from futures that no longer align. The moment your identity shifts, the field reorganizes around a new reference point. Events, opportunities, reactions, even your own interpretations begin adjusting to match the updated self-concept. Recognition selects. The second you recognize yourself as someone aligned, capable, stable, and supported, the timeline that corresponds to that identity strengthens. No effort required. No forcing necessary. Only coherence. 7 minutes is enough to begin that recognition. Enough to interrupt momentum. Enough to soften the grip of an outdated self-image. Enough to let a new identity take root. Do not underestimate subtle stabilization. Identity does not need drama to shift. It needs consistency. Right now, you are choosing which version of yourself becomes dominant. Not through words. Through sustained state. Comment with the words, "I am ready," to anchor this timeline. Control feels powerful, but it is usually fear wearing armor. When you try to control outcomes, you are signaling to reality that you do not trust its responsiveness. Beneath control sits tension. Beneath tension sits doubt. And doubt fragments frequency. Control lowers coherence because it divides you internally. One part of you demands a specific result. Another part fears it may not happen. That internal conflict becomes the broadcast. The field mirrors conflict with delay, resistance, or complication. Forcing repels. The more tightly you grip an outcome, the more unstable your signal becomes. You check for results. You measure progress. You interpret silence as failure. Each reaction interrupts alignment. Each interruption reactivates the old pattern. Control is not strength. It is contraction. Allowing is different. Allowing is not passive waiting. It is relaxed certainty. It is the quiet stability that comes from knowing that once a frequency is set, reality must reorganize around it. Allowing does not chase. It holds. When you allow, your nervous system softens. Breath deepens. The body shifts out of defense. In that relaxed coherence, your identity is no longer trying to prove or protect itself. It simply remains stable. And stability is attractive. Not because the universe rewards calm behavior, but because coherence is structurally easier for reality to mirror. A steady signal is clear. A clear signal organizes probability efficiently. When identity relaxes into trust, resistance dissolves naturally. Trust is not blind belief. It is alignment without contradiction. It is the absence of internal argument. You are not asking whether it will happen. You are not bracing for disappointment. You are simply remaining consistent. This is why surrender increases coherence. Surrender does not mean giving up desire. It means releasing the strain around it. It means understanding that the moment your frequency stabilizes, the outcome is already restructuring at levels you cannot see. Control attempts to micromanage the visible. Allowing stabilizes the invisible. The hidden resistance most people carry is subtle. It sounds like planning every detail. It feels like monitoring every shift. It disguises itself as responsibility. But underneath, it carries the assumption that without constant management, nothing will move. That assumption lowers frequency. The moment you release that assumption, your field becomes lighter. Identity stops clenching. You are no longer trying to force reality into compliance. You are recognizing that reality is already responsive. Forcing pushes against the mirror. Allowing aligns with it. When you relax into trust, you remove friction from the system. Decisions become clearer. Interactions soften. Timing feels less urgent. What once required effort begins unfolding with less strain. This is not magic. It is coherence. 7 minutes of stabilized allowing can dissolve layers of resistance you did not know you were holding. Not because you solved the problem, but because you stopped tightening around it. Control fractures the signal. Allowing strengthens it. And when coherence strengthens, reality reorganizes without being chased. Up until now, you have stabilized frequency and loosened resistance. Now you must understand where creation actually occurs. Not in the past. Not in the future. Only here. The past is memory. The future is projection. Both exist as mental constructs assembled in the present moment. Memory feels solid because it is rehearsed. Anticipation feels real because it is imagined. But neither has creative power. Creation happens now. The present moment is not a thin slice between what was and what will be. It is the only active point of contact between consciousness and reality. It is the only place where frequency can be stabilized. It is the only location where identity can shift. When you dwell in the past, you reactivate old emotional patterns. You strengthen previous identities. When you project into the future with anxiety or urgency, you reinforce instability. In both cases, you remove your awareness from the only creative axis available. Now is the axis. Reality does not reorganize based on what you remember or what you predict. It reorganizes based on the state you embody in this second. The present moment is the command center. Every shift begins here. If you remain in coherent awareness now, even for 7 uninterrupted minutes, you interrupt the continuity of old narratives. The past loses its dominance because it is no longer being rehearsed. The future loses its threat because it is no longer being feared. In this stillness, identity becomes fluid. Identity is not anchored in history. It is stabilized through repeated present awareness. The self you think you are is simply a pattern maintained through consistent thought and emotional rehearsal. Remove the rehearsal, and the pattern weakens. Presence dissolves rehearsal. When you focus fully on this breath, this sensation, this awareness without drifting backward or forward, you step outside the momentum of previous identity. In that space, you are not defined by memory. You are not constrained by expectation. You are simply conscious. And consciousness is creative. The mind tries to convince you that change requires time. That transformation must unfold gradually across weeks, months, years. But time is only the measurement of repeated states. Shift the state now, and the trajectory changes now. 7 minutes of present awareness is enough to disengage from unconscious repetition. Enough to soften identification with the past. Enough to quiet projections about the future. In pure presence, you are not becoming someone else. You are stabilizing as awareness itself. That stabilization is what reorganizes identity from within. Creation cannot happen in yesterday. It cannot happen in tomorrow. It happens the moment you hold a coherent state without interruption. This is why remaining here matters. The present moment is not empty. It is the most powerful field available to you. It is where perception forms. It is where emotion stabilizes. It is where identity reorganizes. Stay here. Because when awareness remains fully anchored in now, reality has no choice but to respond to what you are embodying in this exact second. Time feels solid because your mind stitches it together. Memory creates continuity. Thought narrates sequence. The brain collects moments and arranges them into a story that appears linear. One event leads to another. One decision causes the next outcome. The past seems fixed. The future seems distant. But this sense of progression is constructed in the present. Linear time is a perceptual effect. What you call the past is a memory pattern activated now. What you call the future is an imagined projection assembled now. Both are experiences occurring within this moment. The only point at which perception operates is here. Continuity is assembled, not inherent. The mind replays selected memories repeatedly, reinforcing the illusion that yesterday still governs today. It anticipates future outcomes based on those rehearsed memories, creating a loop that feels inevitable. That loop is mistaken for time itself. But time, as you experience it, is the repetition of pattern thought. When you remain fully present without drifting into rehearsal or projection, something unexpected happens. The rigid continuity begins to soften. The past loses its gravitational pull because it is not being mentally reconstructed. The future loses its weight because it is not being mentally forecasted. Presence destabilizes continuity. 7 minutes of sustained awareness without rehearsing yesterday or predicting tomorrow interrupts the stitching process. The narrative pauses. Without narrative reinforcement, the sense of linear inevitability weakens. In that weakening, new patterns become possible. If continuity depends on repetition, then breaking repetition loosens the timeline. The mind cannot maintain the same trajectory when its reference points are no longer being activated. Without constant mental return to familiar sequences, perception becomes more fluid. Fluid perception allows reorganization. You begin noticing that events do not feel as predetermined. Reactions do not feel automatic. Situations do not seem bound by history. The space between stimulus and response widens. In that space, something new can form. Linear time feels rigid because it is reinforced. When reinforcement stops, rigidity dissolves. This does not mean clocks disappear or schedules collapse. It means your psychological experience of inevitability weakens. You stop assuming that tomorrow must resemble yesterday. You stop expecting repetition as certainty. Sustained presence opens pattern flexibility. When awareness is anchored in a current sensation, current breath, current perception, the mind is not constructing continuity. It is simply observing what is. In observation without narrative, the sense of fixed sequence loses strength. That loss of rigidity is freedom. Freedom from believing that history defines trajectory. Freedom from assuming that the future is a continuation of old momentum. Freedom from unconsciously reinforcing patterns simply because they are familiar. 7 minutes of presence can loosen years of mental stitching. Not because the past disappears, but because its hold weakens. Not because the future is guaranteed to improve, but because it is no longer bound to repetition. Linear time feels solid only when constantly reinforced. Withdraw reinforcement. Remain present. And the continuity you once believed unchangeable begins to open. You do not experience what you want. You experience what you are. Desire is directional, but identity is decisive. You can want expansion while still identifying as limited. You can want abundance while still seeing yourself as someone who struggles. The field does not organize around preference. It organizes around the dominant vibration you consistently embody. Identity is that dominant vibration. It is not your name, your history, or your personality traits. It is the emotional and perceptual baseline you return to automatically. It is the internal posture that feels familiar. It is the story you no longer question. If at your core you see yourself as someone overlooked, reality will reflect subtle confirmations of being overlooked. If you see yourself as capable and supported, circumstances begin aligning in ways that confirm that stability. Not because the world is choosing favorites, but because identity filters perception and selection. Identity is an organizing principle. It determines what you notice, how you interpret events, how you respond, and therefore what unfolds next. The outer world appears objective, but your engagement with it is shaped by who you assume yourself to be. That assumption becomes the stabilizing frequency around which experience arranges itself. This is why effort rarely changes outcomes. Effort attempts to override identity temporarily. You push yourself into action. You repeat new thoughts. You attempt to behave differently. But if the underlying self-concept remains unchanged, the old baseline reasserts itself. Momentum pulls you back. Momentum is identity repeated. 7 uninterrupted minutes of stabilized frequency interrupts that repetition. Not by fighting the old identity, but by suspending its rehearsal. When you remain coherent without slipping into familiar doubt or contraction, you stop reinforcing the old self-image. In that pause, something subtle happens. The automatic narrative weakens. The familiar emotional baseline loosens. You are no longer unconsciously confirming who you used to believe you were. For a moment, identity becomes fluid. And in fluidity, selection changes. 7 minutes is enough to establish a new reference point. Enough to let calm replace tension as the dominant tone. Enough to allow a self-concept rooted in stability rather than struggle to begin forming. You are not creating a new identity through force. You are allowing a more coherent version of yourself to stabilize through consistency. Once that new baseline is felt, even gently, reality begins reorganizing around it. Conversations shift. Opportunities appear differently. Challenges feel less threatening. Not because the world transformed overnight, but because the selector has changed. You. The version of you that holds a coherent state selects a different sequence of events than the version that remains contracted. Identity is the lens. The lens determines the scene. 7 minutes of sustained coherence is enough to begin changing the lens. And once the lens shifts, what you experience next cannot remain the same. You have stabilized the frequency. You have interrupted old momentum. Now reality begins to answer. Not loudly. Not dramatically. Structurally. The first signs are subtle. Synchronicity is not magic. It is feedback. When your internal state becomes coherent, the external field reflects that coherence through alignment patterns. Events begin connecting in ways that feel meaningful. Timing feels precise. Conversations unfold with less friction. Information arrives exactly when needed. This is not coincidence. It is structural resonance. The field responds to stability with organization. When your frequency is scattered, experiences appear fragmented. When your state is aligned, pathways begin smoothing. You may notice that what once required effort now requires less. Delays shorten. Confusion clears faster. Decisions feel simpler. Synchronicity is the field confirming that your signal is clear. It is a feedback loop between identity and environment. As you hold a coherent baseline, reality arranges interactions that mirror that coherence. You think of someone and they reach out. You seek clarity and an answer surfaces unexpectedly. You move with calm and obstacles dissolve without confrontation. These are not rewards. They are reflections. The external world is constantly reorganizing based on dominant vibration. When that vibration stabilizes, the reorganizations become visible. Small alignments accumulate. You begin noticing that you are rarely in the wrong place at the wrong time. Encounters feel orchestrated. Opportunities appear aligned with your internal shift. Ease becomes evidence. Not the absence of all challenge, but the presence of flow. Resistance decreases. Communication improves. Even when contrast appears, it feels navigable rather than overwhelming. Synchronicity is structural feedback that coherence has taken root. It does not mean everything becomes perfect. It means the system is responding. The invisible architecture of probability adjusts, and you perceive the adjustments as meaningful connections. You may notice a sense of being guided without force. You take an action without overthinking, and the result unfolds smoothly. You pause instead of reacting, and the situation resolves on its own. You trust a subtle intuition, and circumstances align around that trust. These are not accidents. They are confirmations that your internal organization is being mirrored externally. The more stable your frequency, the more consistent the feedback becomes. Synchronicity increases as coherence increases. It is important not to chase these signs. Chasing reintroduces tension. Instead, observe them calmly. Recognize them as structural responses to your state. The field is not sending signals to convince you. It is reorganizing because your signal has become dominant. Alignment feels natural when you stop resisting it. You may find yourself less surprised by favorable timing. Less startled by supportive encounters. What once felt rare begins to feel normal. This is the shift becoming visible. Synchronicity is not the goal. It is the mirror confirming that identity and environment are no longer in conflict. And when feedback becomes consistent, you understand something quietly powerful. Reality has begun adjusting around you. The most reliable proof that your frequency has shifted is not outside you. It is within you. Before circumstances visibly change, before outcomes rearrange themselves in obvious ways, something internal stabilizes. Anxiety softens. Urgency decreases. The constant background noise of worry grows quiet. Calm replaces tension. This is the first real evidence. When alignment strengthens, your nervous system no longer reacts to every stimulus as a threat. Situations that once triggered immediate contraction now pass through you with less charge. You observe without absorbing. You respond without spiraling. Neutrality replaces reactivity. Neutrality does not mean indifference. It means steadiness. It means you are no longer pulled into extremes by every fluctuation in your environment. Your emotional baseline becomes stable enough that events do not dictate your inner state. This is alignment becoming embodied. In the past, a delay might have triggered doubt. A disagreement might have triggered defensiveness. Silence might have triggered fear. Those reactions were not random. They were reflections of a baseline identity that expected instability. When your frequency stabilizes, that expectation dissolves. You notice yourself pausing instead of reacting. Breathing instead of bracing. Considering instead of collapsing. The same external event occurs, but your internal posture is different. That difference is everything. Because your internal posture determines your next action. Your next action influences the next outcome. Outer change follows inner stabilization naturally, without force. When calm becomes your baseline, your decisions become clearer. You speak differently. You choose differently. You interpret differently. The world does not need to shift dramatically for your experience of it to transform. This is how alignment restructures life from the inside out. Anxiety fragments perception. Calm integrates it. When you are anxious, you search for threats. When you are stable, you notice opportunity. The same environment can appear hostile or supportive depending on your internal state. Emotional stability refines perception. You may find that things which once felt overwhelming now feel manageable. Not because they disappeared, but because your identity is no longer anchored in fear. You are not fighting every moment. You are moving with it. This steadiness is not dramatic. It is subtle. It feels like a quiet confidence that does not need to announce itself. It feels like trust without constant reassurance. When neutrality replaces reactivity, you conserve energy. When you conserve energy, clarity increases. When clarity increases, decisions align more easily with your deeper intelligence. And from that alignment, external changes begin unfolding without strain. You will know the shift has begun not because everything outside has transformed overnight, but because you are no longer internally destabilized by what has not yet changed. Calm is proof. When your emotional field remains steady regardless of temporary contrast, you are no longer being pulled by the old baseline. You are holding the new one. And when the internal foundation is stable, the external structure must eventually mirror it. When you shift your frequency, the old pattern does not disappear instantly. Momentum lingers. Echoes surface. This is not failure. It is physics. After alignment, you may feel sudden waves of doubt. Unexpected irritation. A spike of anxiety that seems to contradict your progress. The old timeline attempting to reassert itself does not mean you have fallen back. It means the previous baseline still carries residual charge. Momentum fades gradually when it is no longer reinforced. For years, perhaps decades, certain emotional reactions were rehearsed daily. Certain interpretations were automatic. Certain fears were familiar. When you interrupt that repetition, the pattern weakens, but it may surge briefly before dissolving. This surge is contrast sharpening alignment. Contrast reveals what no longer fits. When doubt appears after stability, you see it clearly. It feels foreign instead of normal. When anxiety rises but you no longer fully identify with it, you recognize the difference between the old baseline and the new one. That recognition is growth. The mistake many make is reacting to the echo as if it were evidence that nothing changed. They interpret temporary resistance as regression. That interpretation feeds the old pattern. The moment you fight the echo, you re-engage it. Instead, observe. Let the doubt pass without attaching identity to it. Let the tension move through without concluding that alignment was lost. Remember that sustained frequency collapses weaker signals over time. A fading pattern may attempt to stabilize itself one last time before dissolving. Do not dramatize it. Remain in the new frequency. If calm was established, return to calm. If trust was stabilized, return to trust. Not by force, but by remembering. The more consistently you hold the new baseline without reacting to old echoes, the faster the old structure collapses. Contrast accelerates refinement. When the old timeline tries to reassert through familiar triggers, it offers you clarity. You see the difference between contraction and expansion more distinctly. You recognize how much lighter the new state feels. That recognition strengthens commitment to coherence. You are not fighting the old version of yourself. You are simply no longer rehearsing it. Each time resistance appears and you remain steady instead of reactive, you withdraw energy from the old pattern. Without reinforcement, it cannot sustain itself. It fades. The key is consistency. 7 minutes of coherence begins the shift. Continued coherence solidifies it. Every moment you remain aligned despite temporary turbulence weakens the outdated identity further. The old timeline depends on unconscious repetition. The new one depends on conscious stabilization. When doubt surfaces, do not interpret it as truth. See it as momentum dissipating. When fear spikes, do not assume it has authority. See it as the echo of a structure already collapsing. Remain steady. Because resistance is not proof that alignment failed. It is proof that the old baseline is losing dominance. And when you stay in frequency despite the echo, the collapse accelerates. You have moved through stabilization. Through coherence. Through the quiet restructuring of perception. Now the final recognition emerges, not as theory, but as identity. You are not inside reality. You are reality. The shift is subtle but absolute. For most of your life, you have experienced yourself as a person moving through a world. A body navigating circumstances. A mind interpreting events. But that perspective is partial. It is useful, but incomplete. What you truly are is the awareness within which all of this appears. The thoughts you observe arise within you. The emotions you feel arise within you. The world you perceive appears within the field of your consciousness. Without your awareness, there is no experienced reality. The observer and the observed are not separate. They are one process. You are not a small figure trying to influence a massive external universe. You are the conscious field through which the universe is experienced at all. What you call reality is the structured appearance of perception within awareness. When you remain in a stable frequency, you are not changing something outside yourself. You are reorganizing the field of consciousness from within. Because there is no outside. This recognition changes everything. The idea of separation dissolves. The struggle to control external outcomes weakens. The fear of circumstances loses intensity. If you are the awareness in which events unfold, then events do not define you. They move through you. You are the screen, not the passing images. You are the space in which sound occurs, not the sound itself. When you recognize yourself as consciousness rather than as a fragment within it, the relationship with experience transforms. You no longer feel confined inside the body. The body is experienced within awareness. You no longer feel trapped inside situations. Situations are movements within the field you are. There is no need to manipulate the field when you are the field. Frequency stabilizes naturally when identity dissolves into awareness. Because awareness itself is already coherent. It does not strain. It does not resist. It simply observes. From this vantage point, reality is not something happening to you. It is something unfolding as you. This is not metaphor. It is recognition. When you sit quietly and notice that thoughts come and go, but you remain, you glimpse it. When emotions rise and fall, but something steady remains aware of them, you glimpse it. That steady presence is not inside reality. It is the foundation of it. Observer and field are one continuous process. The division was conceptual. The unity is experiential. You are not influencing a world from the outside. You are the organizing intelligence through which the world becomes visible. And once this is seen, even faintly, the sense of limitation begins dissolving. Because you cannot be confined by what appears within you. You are not in reality. Reality is appearing within you. When frequency stabilizes, life does not become louder. It becomes lighter. You stop pushing so hard. You stop trying to bend circumstances into shape. The constant internal pressure to make something happen begins to dissolve. Not because you gave up, but because you no longer feel separate from the unfolding. Effort reduces naturally. This is not passivity. It is resonance. When your inner state is coherent, decisions arise with clarity instead of confusion. You do not spend hours debating every move. There is a quiet knowing beneath thought. Actions feel timely rather than forced. Words come without rehearsal. Silence feels comfortable instead of threatening. Flow becomes the baseline. You notice that you are no longer chasing outcomes with urgency. You still move. You still choose. You still create. But the movement is smooth. There is less internal friction. Less second-guessing. Less tension in the body. Alignment feels ordinary. You wake up without immediately scanning for problems. You approach tasks without bracing for difficulty. Conversations unfold without defensive anticipation. Even challenges are met with steadiness rather than panic. This is not manifestation in the way it is often imagined. You are not commanding the universe. You are not demanding results. You are not trying to attract specific objects into your life. Instead, you are resonating with coherence. And resonance organizes experience naturally. When a musical instrument is tuned correctly, it does not strain to produce harmony. Harmony arises because the strings are aligned. In the same way, when your internal frequency is stable, experiences that match that stability appear with less resistance. You stop interpreting every delay as failure. You stop reading every silence as rejection. The need to control timing weakens because trust has strengthened. Trust is not blind hope. It is the absence of contradiction. Without forcing, your energy is conserved. When energy is conserved, awareness sharpens. When awareness sharpens, opportunities become visible that you previously overlooked. Not because they were hidden, but because tension was distorting perception. You move through the day with a sense of quiet participation rather than struggle. You are engaged, but not entangled. You are present, but not gripping. Even ambition changes quality. Instead of striving from lack, you create from fullness. Instead of proving yourself, you express yourself. Instead of trying to secure identity through achievement, you act from an identity that already feels stable. Life begins to feel less like a problem to solve and more like a current to move within. This does not mean every moment is effortless. It means resistance no longer defines your baseline. When friction appears, you adjust rather than collapse. When uncertainty arises, you breathe rather than brace. Flow is not dramatic. It is steady. It is waking up without the weight of constant inner conflict. It is acting without the strain of needing immediate validation. It is resting without guilt. Living without forcing is not about doing less. It is about no longer fighting what already is. And when fighting stops, alignment feels natural. There comes a moment when recognition is no longer intellectual. It becomes irreversible. You can study ideas for years and remain unchanged. You can experiment with perspective and still return to familiar patterns. But when you directly recognize that reality mirrors your state, that identity selects experience, and that you are the awareness within which it all unfolds, something fundamental shifts. Perception recalibrates. You cannot unsee what you have seen. You cannot unknow what you have recognized. The old density may echo, old thoughts may arise, but they no longer carry the same authority. They feel thinner. Less convincing. Less solid. This is the irreversible shift. It does not mean you will never feel contrast again. It means you will never fully believe that contrast defines you. It means you will not collapse into the illusion of powerlessness the way you once did. Even if you momentarily contract, a deeper awareness remains present. You know now that state precedes structure. You know now that forcing fractures alignment. You know now that calm coherence reorganizes experience. That knowledge is not fragile. It stabilizes identity at a different level. The version of you that believed reality was fixed has dissolved. The version of you that thought circumstances dictated your inner state has loosened its grip. Identity cannot return to its previous density because density was maintained by unconscious repetition. You are no longer unconscious of it. When an illusion is exposed, it may flicker, but it cannot fully rebuild itself. You have felt what it means to remain steady for 7 uninterrupted minutes. You have sensed the internal reorganization. You have recognized that the field responds. That recognition becomes part of your baseline. From here forward, even if life presents uncertainty, you approach it differently. Not as a victim of unfolding events, but as the stabilizing presence within them. Not as someone trying to escape reality, but as someone who understands its reflective nature. This is not dramatic transformation. It is subtle permanence. You will notice it in small ways. In the way you pause before reacting. In the way you return to calm instead of spiraling. In the way you choose alignment instead of control. These micro shifts accumulate. They redefine trajectory. The old identity depended on believing you were separate from the field. That belief has weakened. And once separation dissolves, the struggle to manipulate outcomes loses urgency. You do not need to force what already responds to you. This is the closing of one cycle and the beginning of another. Not a cycle of effort and frustration, but of coherence and clarity. The shift is not something you will lose tomorrow. It is something you carry because it is rooted in recognition. Recognition changes everything. Remain steady. Remain aware. Remain aligned with the frequency you have stabilized here. Subscribe and share this with someone who needs to hear this before their timeline closes.